People who've been in a coma. What shocked you the most when you woke up? My great grandfather had a stroke in the 90s. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he'd forgotten how to speak English. He could only speak Choctaw, a language he'd learned as a kid because his family lived near the Choctaw Reservation, and he played with a lot of local kids back then. He was fluent in it at the time, but had forgotten it over the years and couldn't recall a single word by then. This lasted about 10 days. Then he woke up from a nightmare and suddenly could only speak English again without remembering a single word of Choctaw. He could also verbatim repeat every conversation that happened in the room while he was in a coma. The brain is an incredible thing. If I'm not mistaken, there's a guy who started speaking in a Cantonese dialect after a coma and ended up dating a Chinese woman. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I woke up, everyone around me was talking about some baby of mine. I'd lost my long term memory and didn't even remember being pregnant. My son was in the neonatal ICU at the Children's Hospital. I'd given birth to him via C section at 29 weeks, all because of Crohn's disease. I found out after I woke up that my colon had ruptured during pregnancy. My husband said I was talking like a child when I first came to. When I woke up, I felt exhausted, and for the next few days, I was pretty anxious. I remembered one conversation between my mom and a nurse while I was out. A couple of days later, my long term memory came back, and I recalled everything up to my second surgery. My son was born during my third surgery. So, yeah, my little boy was the thing that shocked me. Is your son okay? Yeah, he weighed 1 kilogram, 407 grams at birth. Now he's 18 years old and 195 centimeters tall. Thanks for asking. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I woke up, I was still on a ventilator. When they took me off it, my body had forgotten how to breathe on its own. I literally had to relearn how to do it, and it took me a few days. I had no natural sense of how long or deep to inhale, how long to hold the air, or how long to exhale. I had to focus all my concentration on breathing. It was honestly terrifying. For those wondering how I slept, I didn't sleep the first couple of days. If I dozed off, my oxygen sensor would start beeping and wake me up. Then the nurse would yell at me from across the ICU to keep breathing. I couldn't speak because I had tubes in my nose and throat, but I remember waking up one time, exhausted, to that damn beeping. I started focusing on breathing again, but I was so annoyed. My nurse ran over, yelling at me to breathe. I looked at her and shouted with my non existent voice, "I'm breathing!" She must have read my lips and sensed my frustration because she just threw her hands up and said, "Okay, okay, good job," then walked away. I'm sharing this because I've never had the chance to before. My ability to breathe normally came back after about a month or so. I'm doing fine health wise now, so I wouldn't say it's affected me long term. Thanks. Now I'm hyper aware of every breath I take. Don't forget to blink. Damn, you just ruined the next 30 minutes of my life. My mom was in an induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up, she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed and fell on the floor because she couldn't walk. She was mostly scared that her legs had lost their shape. She had to relearn how to control every muscle. She couldn't speak properly and forgot how to write. After relearning, her handwriting was completely different. She said she hated how perfect her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were flawless and clean from not being used at all. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up. Almost all of it had fallen out. She nearly died every day while in the coma. She had sepsis from diverticulitis after a failed surgery. Most of her hair grew back, and she can walk now, but her brain is damaged, so she seems very drunk all the time and is always dizzy. It's been 5 years, and her recovery is nothing short of a miracle. A close family friend was in a coma for 6 months. When he finally woke up, he was shocked that his wife looked so old. In reality, he had lost the last 15 years of his memory. I found out he had 2 kids, but he thought they were still babies, and he didn't even know about his third child. His memory never came back. He skipped from the era of flip phones to smartphones and laptops. Everything was new to him. He was stuck in the early 90s but living in the 2000s. He had to learn a lot, but finding out he'd missed his kids growing up was the hardest part for him. This is the saddest story I've seen in this thread. Oh my god, that's creepy. He must have felt like it was punishment for something awful. My wife was in an induced coma for 2 weeks for medical reasons. When she woke up, she had false memories, all based on conversations that happened in her room. For example, she thought she'd flown to Washington for treatment. While she was in a coma, my dad was talking about how he'd just gotten back from a work trip to Washington. Somehow, she overheard this while unconscious, and her brain interpreted it as her being the one who flew to Washington. Even after we explained the reality of where she was, it took days for her to accept it. My brother in law had a brain tumor, so he was out for a while. When he was first brought to the hospital, the nurses were of Asian descent. So when he woke up, he kept apologizing to people for making them travel to Japan to visit him. My uncle was in a coma for about 3 weeks. When he woke up, he couldn't find his dentures. We completely forgot where we'd put them and spent a whole week looking. At one point, he collapsed by the hospital sink, out of nowhere. They revived him, but couldn't figure out why he could barely breathe. Then the doctor sat us down and showed us x rays with his dentures inside. They'd forgotten to take them out when they intubated him, which blocked his airway or something like that. So, yeah, we found them. Since this got so much attention, I decided to post a picture. It's the only one I have on my old phone. Hope the link works. Here's the photo. Oh, damn. Don't even get me started. I haven't seen a Blackberry in ages. I was in a coma for 4 days from bacterial meningitis. When I woke up, I was completely deaf. I had to communicate with my parents and doctors using a notepad and pen. Gradually, hearing came back in my left ear, but my right ear is still 100% deaf to this day. Anyone else who's had bacterial meningitis? I'm so glad you survived. It could have been so much worse. Thanks, man. I'm glad I pulled through too. The doctors gave me a 10% chance of survival. Damn, you made it through too. I talked to my mom. She said the doctors gave me only a 5% chance of surviving. Holy cow, my wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to contrast dye, and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For almost 3 months, she kept talking to her long dead parents. She'd talk about them like they were in the next room, or she'd say her daughter or brother called, but they hadn't. She kept thinking my mom and dad were alive. It drove me nuts having to gently correct her multiple times a day. She'd come up with these incredible stories about what relatives, friends, or neighbors were doing, what they were saying, really creative fiction. After 3 months, she started coming back to herself. The confusion stopped. She can remember recent events now, but her older memories are gone. I can't imagine what that's like. It must be awful. Sometimes she cries over the lost memories, but overall, she's doing really well. My dad had a reaction to contrast dye after a head injury. He had seizures. It was like a brain reset. He could only say girl because my sister had just been born. He couldn't hold or grab things. He spent a few months in therapy. Eventually, his mood changed. He became very irritable, less patient, and super sleepy. He's okay now, except for some neck pain. About 20 years ago, my cousin got a serious head injury from a fall. He was around 20 years old and was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he quickly realized he had an eidetic memory. He could recount any conversation, word for word, and even tell you the date and time it happened. He could also memorize an image in just a few seconds. His memory is still eidetic to this day. It's freaking annoying whenever it reminds me of something I said in the past. Usually stuff I can't even remember. I say we smack him on the head again. Judging by what happened last time he got hit in the head, he'd probably just gain another superpower. Better not risk trying to fix him. He's just malfunctioning. We need to turn him off and on again. Diabetic ketoacidosis put me in a coma. I have vague memories of being sick. My sense of time was a complete mess. Even years later, I can't piece together a proper timeline. I have flashes of memories of different doctors coming in and out of the room. When I came out of the coma, I was still out of it. I was on an insulin drip, and the doctors checked my blood sugar every hour. I could never fall asleep, but I felt like I was sleeping the whole time. It's hard to describe that feeling, just a mushy, dragging sense of time. I was in a coma for almost 6 weeks. When I woke up, I had to relearn everything. I retained most of my speech abilities, but my motor skills were awful. I had to learn how to wipe my butt again, as well as how to go up and down stairs. It took about 3 weeks. I also lost a ton of weight. I'm 190 centimeters tall and weighed about 65 kilograms. 6 weeks. Jesus Christ. A severe head injury, after which they did an MRI with contrast dye that I was severely allergic to. I died on the table for a few minutes. My 14-year-old nephew was in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During that time, he lost about 30% of his body mass because his muscles atrophied. His first comment when he saw himself was, "You forgot to feed me." It was incredibly hard to hear, especially since his family had been sitting and sobbing by his bedside the whole time he was unconscious. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, from September 2nd to September 26th, 2001. I was driving through Pennsylvania on my way to meet with the head of marketing for the company I was working for at the time. I set out on that trip on September 2nd, 2001, and I don't really remember what happened except for what the medics and hospital staff told me. The gist of it is that I was hit, or more like wiped out, by a drunk driver going 60 miles per hour. He crossed 3 lanes to get to the exit I was on, basically putting me in his blind spot at the worst possible time. On top of that, he was completely wasted. Pretty much everyone here can guess what happened on September 11th, 2001. It felt like I teleported or time traveled, because 1 minute I'm driving and the next I'm battered and bloody on a hospital bed with a brace on my back and neck, burns from the airbag gas, an IV in my arm, and a few other minor injuries. When I woke up, I was in a completely different world than the one I'd left before I fell asleep. The economy was fine, the world was generally cool, and then I woke up to all of that. Big thanks for watching. In the comments, feel free to share. If you've been in a coma, what shocked you when you woke up? And don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel.